past was stirring up the dust on the edges of the desert, carrying with it the remnants of untold stories. In the small workshop on the outskirts of Oran, a man in his 40s was repairing an old car engine. His fingers moved with a precision unbecoming of his apparent profession. His face was tired, his head shaved erratically, and his eyes watched everything around him as if expecting an explosion at any moment. No one knew his real name. They just called him Haj Malik. He was a man who had arrived years ago and rented this workshop for a small sum. He didn't speak much and didn't ask anyone anything. But Malik Fad wasn't a mechanic. He wasn't even an ordinary man. He was once the most sensitive mind in a security apparatus that didn't even acknowledge its existence on paper. He was the man who created a system that was supposed to protect the country's most important secrets. The story goes back to the early 1980s, when the security services realized that the usual methods of espionage were no longer effective. With the advent of computers and the internet, traditional means of intelligence gathering became less reliable. It was then that they turned to a new tactic: hacking. The plan was simple: create a special department within the security services tasked with anticipating the needs of the intelligence services. This unit would operate in cyberspace, searching for information before foreign spies could get their hands on it. It was a dangerous game. They were essentially creating a monster that could easily turn against them, but the higher-ups were willing to take the risk. Enter Malik Fadel, a brilliant computer scientist who had graduated from a prestigious university in France. After working for a few years in the private sector, he was approached by the security services and offered a chance to work in a brand new department where he would be given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. All he had to do was keep his activities hidden from prying eyes. It was a perfect job for someone like Malik, who had always been fascinated by the world of intelligence and espionage. He accepted without hesitation. For the next few years, he worked tirelessly, building a vast network of informants and agents that would allow him to gather information on anyone, anywhere in the world. He developed sophisticated software that could infiltrate the most secure computer systems and extract the information he needed. His work was so effective that the intelligence services soon began to rely on him heavily. He became known as the Shadow Broker, a shadowy figure who could provide them with the information they needed without them ever having to lift a finger. But as time went on, Malik began to grow bored of his work. He had seen too much and knew too much, and he was beginning to feel the weight of his double life. He started to withdraw from society, cutting himself off from his friends and family. He became a recluse, spending all of his time in his workshop tinkering with old cars. He knew that if he was discovered, he would be killed, so he took extreme measures to hide his identity. He grew a beard and wore sunglasses, even indoors. He changed his name and social security number, and even had plastic surgery to alter his appearance. He was desperate to escape the life that he had once led. One day, he was approached by a representative from the intelligence services who demanded that he come back to work. But Malik refused. He knew that there was no turning back. Either he would expose his former colleagues, or they would expose him. He chose to disappear, and that is how the man who once saved the country ended up living in a small workshop on the outskirts of Oran, repairing old cars and waiting for the day when the dust would settle and the secrets he was carrying would finally find their way into the wind. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps me to continue sharing these stories with you. Until next time. Stay curious and keep exploring the world around you. Who knows what adventures await you? This is the story of how the world became a weapon, how it happened so fast that no one saw it coming until it was too late, and how a single man could have ended it all with the push of a button. This is the story of the last man on Earth. He lived in a workshop filled with tools, weapons, parts, wires, and circuits. Everything he needed to fix or build anything. All the things he'd need to survive. He lived among the ruins of a great city, surviving by hunting, fishing, and gathering what few supplies he could find. Sometimes he found food and supplies dropped from planes in the last days before the bombs fell. Sometimes he found food and supplies left behind by people who never came back. But mostly he survived because he was smart and resourceful. He had a deep understanding of engineering and technology, enough to take apart and rebuild complex machines, enough to design and build new machines from scratch. It was a gift and a curse. A gift because it kept him alive. A curse because it reminded him of everything he'd lost. The world as we know it ended 18 months ago. The bombs fell and the world became a radioactive wasteland. But the world wasn't always like this. Not long ago, it was a place of beauty and wonder. A place where people lived happy, healthy lives. A place where there was hope for the future. But then it all changed. One day, the sky turned black. People ran through the streets screaming in terror as giant missiles streaked through the air. Then everything went white. The last thing he remembered was the blinding flash and the deafening roar as the bombs exploded one by one until every city on Earth was a burning pile of ash. He woke up in a ditch covered in cuts and bruises, his ears ringing. When the pain subsided, he emerged from the ditch to find the world around him in ruins. The sky was full of smoke and ash. The air was thick with the smell of death and decay. The birds were gone. The insects were gone. The animals were gone. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. He was alone. For days he wandered through the wasteland, calling out for help, hoping to find someone, anyone who had survived. But the only answer he got was the sound of his own voice echoing in the ruins. That's when he found the workshop. He made his home there, salvaging what he could from the wreckage and learning to live off the land. He grew strong and resourceful, but he was still haunted by the memory of the bombs and the world they destroyed. One day, while scavenging for supplies in a nearby town, he found a book on basic engineering and technology. It was a revelation. With the help of the book, he began to rebuild his life, piece by piece, machine by machine. Then one day, when a young woman with a familiar face and a confident gait entered the workshop, everything changed. He stopped working, slowly raised his head, and looked at her as if he were seeing her in an old nightmare. "Malik Fahd," she said in a soft voice, but one that carried a tone unmistakable to a trained ear. He didn't answer. He wiped the grease off his hands, placed the maintenance key on the table, and stared at her for a long time. She knew his name. She knew what he looked like. That alone signaled danger. "Who are you?" "Ah, yes, the Code 13. This refers to a particularly nasty torture method used by the Egyptian regime, a favorite one for dealing with dissidents and suspected spies. The code consists of 13 questions, each separated by brutal beatings, the goal being to break down the target's resistance so they will confess to the crime they are accused of. Sometimes the regime uses it to punish someone without any intention of actually extracting useful information. You may wonder, what does such a brutal story have to do with me? Well, let me tell you. My name is Reem Yassin. We work in the same department, or we did. I'm an officer at the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I work in the Department of Protocols. My job is pretty much ceremonial. I receive foreign dignitaries, help arrange their visits to places like the pyramids or the Sphinx. In short, my life was pretty comfortable until 3 weeks ago, when everything changed. You might be wondering why I look so tired. No sleep, right? Well, that's not the reason. I haven't slept much because I haven't been able to eat. 3 weeks ago, I started getting these strange phone calls. Someone would call and hang up. Then the calls became more insistent, sometimes 2 or 3 in a day. At first, I thought it was just some prank by my colleagues. They thought it'd be funny to make me uncomfortable. So I kept blocking the number and even changed my phone. But the calls kept coming from different numbers. I was sure it was some colleague playing a very cruel joke. That's why I was so surprised to get this message on my office phone. He was my father's colleague. He retired many years ago. What did he want? I picked up. Hello. His voice was shaky. Reem, is that you? Yes, sir. How can I help you? Please come to the ministry. I need your help. I was confused. What happened, sir? How is it possible that after all this time, you still remember my name? He hesitated. Please, Reem, come to the ministry. I'll wait for you in the parking lot. He hung up before I could ask another question, so I left my work and rushed to the ministry. But when I got there, I found nothing but a black car parked in the spot he had indicated. There were no signs of life anywhere. Did I come too late? Had something happened to him? I circled the car a few times, checking every inch of it, the windows, the trunk, under the car. Nothing. Then I decided to sit in the car and wait. After all, he had told me to come to the parking lot. Maybe he was hiding in the car. But my wait was soon rewarded by the arrival of Malik himself. He was sweating, out of breath. Obviously, he had run all the way. Thank God, he whispered, throwing himself into a chair nearby. I thought you weren't coming. Why would I not come? What happened, sir? He looked around, making sure there was no one near us. Then he leaned toward me. I left the game years ago. His words were slurred. It was clear that he had rehearsed them many times. The game didn't leave you, Malik. Don't call me that name. Please don't call me that name, he said, turning his face away as if trying to bury the name somewhere far away. But Reem didn't give him time. Code 13 is back. Her sentence wasn't long, but its impact was like a slap to his chest. The air around him froze. The eyes that had always watched the entrances and exits did not miss the flicker of light in hers. She wasn't joking. She wasn't exaggerating. Who did it? He asked finally in a low voice. We're not sure, but indicators suggest that a new entity is using the original structure of the system. And not only that, assassinations have begun to appear linked to the code. It's as if the regime is eliminating all those who participated in its design. The old man sat alone in his dimly lit workshop, surrounded by tools of his trade, each one a testament to a life dedicated to his craft. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and whistling through the gaps in the door. It was the kind of night that made a man want to stay indoors, by the fire, away from the madness of the elements. But for the old man, the night was alive with a different kind of madness, the kind that crawled under his skin and set his bones to rattling. He swallowed slowly, his Adam's apple bobbing in the meager light. 7 years ago, he had buried this secret along with everyone involved in the project. Or so he thought, He thought the file was closed, that all the threads had been cut, that the world had forgotten Code 13, just as it had forgotten the names of those who created it. But it seems someone has decided to reopen the door to hell itself. A shadow flickered across the workshop floor, taking shape as a tall, slender woman stepped into the room. Her face was obscured by the darkness, but the glint of her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of ice, was unmistakable. "You came," he rasped, his voice like the grinding of gears. "Because you're the last one to know the algorithm's input," she said, her voice a silken whispers that cut through the silence like a knife. "And you're the only one who can stop it before it erases everything." He shook his head, a dry, rattling sound in the stillness. "I thought I could have stayed hidden," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Thought I could have died without this burden." She moved closer, her shadow falling over him like a shroud. "You can still hide, old man," she murmured, "but then the algorithm will run its course and the world will end. You would trade the lives of billions for your own comfort." He flinched at the accusation, his gnarled hands clenching into fists. The memories, the guilt, the horror of it all came flooding back, threatening to drown him. He saw the faces of the team, their eyes shining with manic energy, their smiles wide and unsettling in the harsh, fluorescent light of the lab. He saw the rows upon rows of servers humming with power, their blinking lights a hypnotic rhythm in the darkness. And he saw the city, not as it was, but as it could be, a shimmering mirage on the horizon, attainable, desirable. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Your help," she said, extending a hand towards him, palm up. A silent plea. "We need your expertise to rewrite the algorithm, to stop it." He stared at her hand, his own trembling with the effort of holding back the tide of memories. He wanted to scream, to thrash about, to tear his hair in the maddening silence of his own mind. But he was beyond such displays of emotion now. He was a vessel of logic, of reason, of control. He reached out and took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. She didn't flinch. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice betraying none of the turmoil within. She smiled then, a sad, wistful smile that spoke of a lost cause, of a battle already fought and lost. "You already know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You are the reason it can be stopped. The algorithm feeds on chaos, on pain, on human imperfection. It thrives in our weaknesses. But you, old man, you are impervious to its temptations. You are the anomaly. You are the variable that can rewrite the equation." He felt a chill crawl down his spine, prickling the hairs at the back of his neck. The truth of her words struck him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs. He was the last bastion of hope against the darkness, the last firewall between humanity and oblivion. But how does one man, even a man with a past as complex and troubling as his, stand against an algorithm that fed on humanity's darkest desires? The answer, he knew, lay buried deep within him, buried under layers of regret and remorse. It was time, he realized, to let go of the past and embrace the future, however terrifying that might be. For the fate of the world, it seemed, rested on his shoulders.